being delivered from its origin source, going through a multi-step process, contacting the receptor side of a cell, and that one message gives an instruction to the DNA to then produce a protein. Now, when you describe it like that, most people don't have any understanding of what's going on in terms of their hormonal system. They have a generalized idea that hormones are these things, and they make things happen. It's not so simple as that. So we need to understand that a hormone is a messenger with a very targeted, specific message to deliver. So that's something that, again, I don't find that most people know about that part. So I thought I'd introduce that idea. Now, the players in the game of what tonight's talk is about. The pineal gland, I'm going to use that as the first initiator of the hormonal process. Then the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the thyroid, and the adrenal all come in a sort of prioritized down the pipeline kind of effect to the point where then these messages have to go through multiple steps. So the pineal gland evaluates your environment. Your pineal gland is what determines your reaction to it's light, it's dark, it's hot, it's cold, it's loud, it's quiet. Whatever environmental signals there are, both internal and external, the pineal gland is the one that's reading that environment to say, here is our status quo, here's what we are in relationship to. Now, that gland will then send messages to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is sort of the intermediary translator of the whole bunch here, in that it takes neurological information, turns that into hormonal messaging. It'll take hormonal messages from the pineal and turn that into messaging to the pituitary. It'll take amounts of hormone in the bloodstream, measure that, and turn it into messages for the pituitary. So this hypothalamus is this multi-complex, talented, and sort of thing that can measure and interpret and then give proper relayed responses to. It doesn't determine what hormones are made. It determines how we go through the process of making those hormones. So then it's going to send messages to the pituitary gland. Now, this is what people in the past have often called the master gland. Now, the pituitary really is nothing more than the producer of stimulatory hormones. The pineal messages the hypothalamus messages the pituitary says, oh, okay, I'll make that hormone. Now, that hormone is going to be a stimulatory hormone or peptide that will go through the bloodstream. That's the thing that actually then gets to the gland, the target gland, and causes production from the gland. So we've already got a three-part process before we even begin the process of messaging the gland to do its job. So again, this is really a very complex thing, even from the outset. Now, if we're talking about the thyroid, there's a hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is the most common thyroid hormone that's measured in any kind of evaluation, especially from a medical doctor. Thyroid, TSH is often measured in just your basic wellness panel on your yearly visit. TSH is a stimulatory hormone that goes to the thyroid gland from the pituitary gland down to the thyroid and says, hey, thyroid, based on the amount of TSH, make this amount of raw thyroid hormone. Okay, great. Now the thyroid then picks up the pace, does its job based on how much is being stimulated. Thyroid stimulating hormone, right? Now, for our adrenals, it's a slightly more complex process, but again, basically, the pituitary will send down something called adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. This is nothing, again, other than a messenger that will go to the adrenal gland and have the adrenal make hormones based on the amount of the ACTH that it's receiving. So again, it's nothing more than a complex process of step by step by step by step. And then the end user finally makes the resultant hormone that's in reaction to what the pineal originally measured. So this is a loop of things that always occurs. Now, the pineal, let's start there and go into a little bit more detail. The pineal measures the internal environment, blood sugar, inflammation, infection, toxins, any kind of metabolic process that's happening internally of the body. And this will then include stress that's mental, emotional. This will get into the pineal gland and say the pineal gland will then measure you, the environment, and have responsive, evaluative messaging to then send down to the hypothalamus. Similarly, then there's our external environment. So that means that if it's hot, if it's cold, if there's smoke in the air that we're breathing, anything that's going on in the external environment is also then measured by that pineal gland. Now, that external environment also includes a clock. What I mean by a clock, we have a clock of the daylight nighttime cycle. We have the measurement of what 24 hours is. And so our body uses the pineal gland as the here's what's supposed to be going on when body clock. So all the external environment then becomes again measured, and how are we going to respond to that external environment? If we see the sun setting, this nice orange glow in the sunset, our melatonin levels will start bumping up because now we recognize, oh, it's dark, we should sleep. Now the natural cycle will kick in for that more elevated melatonin production, which is, by the way, produced in the pineal gland. So really, this is the real master gland because it determines everything else that happens from there on. If it does not measure correctly, if it does not react correctly with the right stimulatory hormones, the wrong response to the environment, internal or external, can occur. So really, the pineal is extremely important. Now we have then the hypothalamus. As I mentioned, it's an interpreter. It takes information in large, mass, complicated form, thins it down to a narrow stream, and says, here's how we're going to respond to that large amount of complex information. And we're going to do it message by message by message by message. That's the interpreter making a sort of more systematic response to the environment. And so here, this also then is the thing that gets the pituitary to kick into gear. Without messages from the hypothalamus, the pituitary would sit there and not be reactive and not do anything, and the rest of the glands would then not operate either. So like I said, it's kind of like a cattle prod. This hypothalamus is sending pretty vigorous messages to make that pituitary produce its hormones. Now, pituitary is going to be next here. The pituitary then is really the sergeant of the hormonal system. This is the guy who's yelling at you to encourage you to act and do what he wants him to do. So if you've ever been in a situation where you have a coach or a sergeant or something like this that's yelling at you to make you do what you're supposed to do, that's what the pituitary really is. It is not a master gland because it doesn't do anything except what it's told to do. So in that case, you have the anterior and posterior. That means front and back. And so the anterior pituitary is the one that does most of the hormonal stimulation, as I've been talking about. The posterior is more about regulating things like blood pressure, growth hormone, things like this. So you have the anterior pituitary that's sending out all these stimulatory messages. Now, once released from there in the brain environment, they're going to travel down through the bloodstream, get through the bloodstream, make contact with the receptor sites of your cells, and now the glands will pick up that pituitary stimulus and start making their hormones in relationship to how much hormone the pituitary produced. So this is, again, a step-by-step. This is now this whole cycle of things happening. You have your environmental stimuli in the body clock from the pineal, which signals the hypothalamus. That has a hormone-to-hormone relationship or neurology-to-hormone relationship of sending messages. It then sends those messages to the pituitary. We have both hormonal messaging and peptide messaging that goes out from the pituitary to signal all the other glands and cells what to do. So now we understand that this is the top of the scale. Now, in traditional Chinese medicine, this would be known as the TH3, or the upper dantian of all of the guiding forces that regulate hormonal function, and they're all within the brain environment. Now, once we leave that and start getting down into any of the other glands, whatever other gland you want to talk about here, there's a system that happens, and it's called the negative feedback loop. Here's your cell. Your cell says, hey, I'd like some hormone down here. Now, based on whatever hormone it happens to need, it will produce what's called the releasing factor. So if your thyroid needs more hormones, or if your cells perceive that they need more hormones from the thyroid, they'll go, hey, let's produce some thyrotropic releasing factor, a little protein. And that protein goes up into the brain environment, and it's measured by the hypothalamus. Oh, look, we have a bunch of TRF coming in. Now we're going to turn around and send these messages through the pineal, hypothalamus, pituitary. How much releasing factor is in the bloodstream equals how much stimulatory hormone is produced by our axis up here. Then that's going to go to the glands. Now, based on the amount that the glands get, again, they're going to produce an amount of their hormone that they put out. And then that's going to be delivered to the cell. Now, upon delivery to the cell, the amount that the cell gets will then regulate how much TRF it's going to, or how much releasing factor it's going to have put out. The less hormone it needs, the less releasing factor it puts out. The more hormone it needs, the more releasing factor it puts out. So this is a self-regulatory negative feedback loop. The more hormone comes in, the less stimulation is needed to make more hormone. Now, in that case, then we say, if that's the case, there's the adrenal feedback loop. So the pineal gland senses external and or internal threat or emergency. Now, by threat or emergency, I always use the example, you're walking around in the woods and all of a sudden there's a big bear. Now, in that moment, you instantly recognize that this has the potential for threat and danger. So what your pineal gland will immediately do is access memory of what is a bear, what should I do? And it's going to start sending emergency messages immediately down to the hypothalamus saying, oh my goodness, we've got danger here. We better do something about this. So now the pineal message is then interpreted by the hypothalamus and a reactionary stimulus is generated. The hypothalamus is going to take the information it's given, funnel it down to a core message, and then send that to pituitary. Hey, pituitary, we're in danger. We better get some stimulus of adrenocorticotropic hormone going down to the adrenals, please. Now, this is obviously way faster than what I'm describing. This can happen what seems to be almost instantaneously, but this is still a process that it has to go through. So now the ACTH is going to go down to the adrenals. Now the adrenals say, oh, gee, there comes a big flood of this emergency hormone. I really better pump out the adrenaline here. Based on the amount that I'm getting, I better max out and flood the system with a whole bunch of adrenal hormone. Now, what that's going to do is change all of the physiology to allow more blood to go into the heart and the lungs and the muscles and the part of your brain that has to do with hand-eye coordination and sensory things, so you can run away from a bear or climb the tree or whatever you need to do to get away from that danger. So the idea here is that based on whatever internal and or external threat or emergency is, the amount of it and the severity of the threat, this whole system kind of varies the responses and gives you varying levels of stimulus to then get down to the end user, in this case, the adrenals. Now, the adrenals are the emergency response glands. They are the first one to show up whenever there's an emergency. Now, one of our problems, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, one of our problems is our entire society, our media, our jobs, our daily lives, driving a car, everything seems to be perceived as an emergency. Now, with that many emergencies constantly occurring, some people, it seems to be 24/7, you're going to wear your adrenals out. This is known as adrenal fatigue or adrenal exhaustion. There's complicating things that happen when you no longer meet the emergency needs of adrenal hormones. That is a whole thing in and of itself. But that's a big problem with most people's hormones, is the message from the pineal and then the hypothalamus and then the pituitary remains the same. It's relative to the amount of stress. What if you can no longer produce the amount of responsive adrenal hormone? This is where we're going to get into deficit. This becomes a big problem, okay? Now, there is a relationship here to a very common problem that I'd point out, the blood sugar interjection into the adrenal feedback loop. So here, if you have high blood sugar, you've eaten a meal, and for a period of time just following the meal, it's okay to have some high blood sugar. That's pretty normal. But after a little bit, the insulin is supposed to come out and pull more sugar from the bloodstream into the cells and reduce the overall blood sugar down to normal. It's called the glycation gap. Now, what's supposed to happen then is that's a relatively short period of time and your body doesn't have an emergency with this. But what if you're no longer able to pull that sugar down because you have insulin resistance? That's high blood sugar that's sustained for a period of time. That's an emergency. So now the hypothalamus, measuring things in the bloodstream, says there's too much blood sugar. It's not going down. It's way after we've eaten. So we better react and produce growth hormone releasing hormone, the GHRH. This is going to release to cause the pancreas to release more insulin. The problem with this is, in that secondary emergency response, you have to have norepinephrine from the adrenals to make that process happen. So now your adrenals just got tapped on the shoulder and said, pancreas can't handle this. Can you help out? Put some emergency hormone into the system so the pancreas can release more insulin, please. Now, what then happens is the cortisol that causes all that to happen then ends up storing excess sugar in the liver and in the muscles and in places where you don't move very much, say like the belly and the buttocks. So this is where the mid-body fat comes in. This is stored by cortisol, excess adrenal hormone, because you can't seem to resolve the immune system. Or, I'm sorry, you can't seem to resolve the emergency. The sugar remains high and remains high and remains high. Something's got to get done. Well, let's turn it into fat that we can store for later. Get it out of the way so it doesn't impede our movement. So we'll put it on our belly as opposed to our legs and arms. Why? Because then that doesn't interfere with our ability to hunt or gather food, a survival thing. Now, let's switch that over and go to a low blood sugar state. Now, this is also a perceived emergency. Just like the high, the low is perceived as you're starving. So let's get you an adrenal hit to excite the body into a state of hunting more food. Now, what's supposed to happen there is norepinephrine is again required to go now to the pancreas and say, release some glucagon. Now, glucagon is a hormone like insulin. It just has the opposite effect. Glucagon will go to the liver, knock on the liver's door and say, can I borrow a cup of sugar? It's going to pull sugar out of the liver into the bloodstream so that now there's no longer an emergency of low blood sugar. The problem here is what if you don't have enough adrenal capacity to cause that to happen? This is the person who's fallen asleep after their meals. This is the person who's foggy brain, needs the caffeine, has to have a snack or eat every 2 hours. That's this situation. Your adrenals are no longer capable of exciting glucagon from the pancreas to get the liver to release its sugar. So either way, a high or a low is tapping into the blood sugar emergency response, and the entire system, pineal, hypothalamus, pituitary, pancreas, liver gets involved there. Finally, the adrenals are the one that solve the problem. But if this is persistent and you're on a blood sugar roller coaster all day long, up and down, high carbohydrate diets, no exercise, this is going to end up causing you to wear out your adrenal response. When you wear out your adrenals, that's when diabetes happens. You can have all the precursor conditions for diabetes up to the point where your adrenals still have capacity. Your A1C and your serum glucose will be normal. As soon as your adrenals tap out, now you're going to have diabetes because your adrenals were staving it off for a long time until you wear them out. So oftentimes the treatment for diabetes that I have in my office is treat the adrenals instead. So this is a very complex situation again, but we have to realize this is all a big feedback loop again and again. This is all feedback loops of interchanging interreactive hormones. Now, the adrenal blood sugar symptom set. If you're high blood sugar, you can have anxiety, panic, weight gain, high blood pressure, hot flashes, insulin resistance, elevated A1C in your blood, inflammation. Because insulin is an inflammatory molecule. When you have insulin in your system, it inflames and damages tissue, especially in excess amounts, especially over extended periods of time, like in diabetes, which is why people with diabetes have increased cardiovascular symptoms, eye problems, neuropathy, etc. Now, in a low blood sugar state, it's more of a depressive, weight gain, low blood pressure, fatigue, brain fog kind of thing. By the way, for the women who said hot flashes, what do you mean hot flashes? What I mean is that when you have an emergency need of adrenal hormone to manage your blood sugar is relatively normal until your adrenals fail. Then, because they've failed, we have to go borrow progesterone, move that from the reproductive system into the emergency response adrenal thing. Now you lack progesterone. Suddenly, within seconds, you can go from normal blood sugar and normal progesterone to now you have to have adrenal help. They fail. Your blood sugar fails. Therefore, your progesterone is pulled away, called pregnenolone steal. Now your progesterone drops out from underneath you. Your ratio drops, and now you have a hot flash. Hot flashes are not female hormone initiated. They're blood sugar adrenal initiated. So this is where, again, there's a misunderstanding of this whole interrelationship between things. Estrogen and progesterone don't act independently. They're very interactive with blood sugar and adrenals. All right, so then we get into the thyroid feedback loop. Now I'm going to be a presenter at the American Naturopathic Medical Association's annual event. I'm going to be a presenter there. I'm also then teaching a course before that in how to be a practitioner and how to work with thyroid. So this is a lot of information that I've condensed into one slide, but let me try to get through this. So the thyroid feedback loop, thyrotropic releasing factor. Again, this is a releasing factor sent from the cells that will be caught up in the pineal hypothalamic area saying, hey, they want more thyroid down there. They sent a lot of message. We better get a lot of hormone out to them. This is the start of the feedback messaging. Now, that's going to go to the pituitary, hypothalamic pituitary center. The brain-based hormones are going to see how much T4 is in the bloodstream. Now, if we know anything about T4, what does the T stand for? Tyrosine. 4 stands for 4 atoms of iodine. And T4 is the raw product that is produced within the thyroid gland. And actually, it's T1, T2. We lump the T2s together, become T4. That's about 90% of the production. Point about this is that the T4 is what just got measured by the pituitary hypothalamic area. How much do we need to put out is based on the amount of T4 that's running around the bloodstream. Let's remember that. So the point about this is that then based on the amount of TSH, the thyroid makes a relevant amount of T1, T2, which are lumped together. We end up with 90%-ish T4, a few T3s out of that. When we're talking about your cells, what are they demanding? They want T3, not T4. So what has to happen is that the T4 is routed to the liver. T4 is doing nothing for you at this moment. T4 goes to the liver, and in the liver, the delta-5 desaturase or deiodinase enzyme takes an iodine molecule off and attaches a molecule of cholesterol to the remaining T3. Now there's your complete T3 hormone that stimulates metabolism. Now that's very important because the liver plays an important role here in the manufacturing of and refinement of your thyroid hormone. It's produced in the gland, but the gland produces a worthless hormone until the liver does its job, and then the liver plops it onto what's called a thyroid binding globulin. This is a delivery vehicle. It's a lot like a passenger bus. There's a number of seats available. Well, the passenger T3s pile on, they fill up the seats, and then the globulin goes out into the bloodstream and delivers the thyroid evenly throughout the whole body, a little bit at a time in each and every cell. Now, that's how we deliver our thyroid T3 completed hormone. Then once the T3 gets to the cell, it's stimulated to produce its metabolism, and the need for more is satisfied. Now, here's the problem. You have T4 as the amount that the pineal hypothalamic pituitary measure. We're basing this on T4. What if you produce enough T4, or what if you're taking a pill of T4, and that gets into the system, but your liver isn't conjugating it? We see this all the time. This is a underconversion of T4 to T3, because what you get is a whole lot of T4, which is worthless. You're not converting it to T3, so therefore the cells are still screaming, hey, we still aren't getting T3 down here. Can you please send some more? So they take more releasing factor and they send it up, and more TSH is created, and more T4 is made, and T3 never gets there. All because this is a liver problem. So this is where we get into the need for healthy, clean livers, and especially the methylation sort of raw material that you would get from B vitamins, methyl nutrition. So these are things that would then contribute to this feedback loop being complete. I see a lot of people where this is not complete. People are taking pharmaceutical replacement models of T4 that still have all the thyroid symptoms because they're not getting conjugation in the liver. So we need to be very carefully and astute that the liver plays a major role in all hormonal handling that goes on in the body. Now, hormone resistance. Everyone here has probably heard of insulin resistance. Now, what happens here? The cell receptors say, insulin, you keep coming around here every 2 hours. I'm kind of sick of you, and I spend a lot of energy responding to every time an insulin molecule hits this receptor, so I have to go through this whole chain of working all these amino acids and nutrition and making me pull sugar in, and it's just getting tiresome. So as a method of not being overburdened and overreactionary and wasting energy and metabolism from overabundant hormones, the receptor sites dial down how much action they take per hormone that hits them. This is insulin resistance is one model. You can get thyroid resistance. If you're taking an outside exogenous thyroid and you're taking too much of it, and there's too much floating on your bloodstream, you can actually have an inefficiency of action of your thyroid hormone based on thyroid resistance. You can get adrenal resistance. You can get estrogen resistance. Any hormones in overabundance that's overwhelming the cell receptors will eventually be dulled down in how much response there is to it. So too much hormone of any kind for too long can become a problem. So somatostatin is in a way that the body would use to correct that problem. Now, this is, again, with the way the body's made, it has no concept of outside source of hormone. But let's just say, for instance, your gland happened to produce a whole bunch of a hormone that's overwhelming the system. And the body says, well, hey, we can't have all that running around. Let's do for the pituitary gland up here, let's have a hormone, that's actually more of a peptide, turn the crank and turn the pituitary off. No stimulatory hormones are going to be made because we have an overabundance of one. What happens to the production of all other hormones? They're also shut off. So if you take so much, an excess of any hormone, somatostatin will cycle down all of the rest of all hormonal production. So you see this in people who take, say, steroids to build large muscles. Their hormones are a mess because they've got so much of one kind of hormone in the system that it's ending up shutting off all the others. And this becomes a gigantic problem. So excess hormone is not a good strategy for anybody, for anything, because one or two of these things can happen. Now, solutions that we have for the adrenal axis. This is where we'd say there's, remember, ACTH hormone coming down from the pituitary and pineal hypothalamus based on the perception of emergency and threat. The amount of that ACTH hits the adrenal glands, and they then have to turn around and produce emergency life-saving hormone. So here, the adaptive oil and capsules have GABA in them. Now, GABA, as a neurotransmitter, is something that limits and restrains and restricts and reduces the amount of that stress signaling. That means we just basically telling the pineal gland, shut up. Don't let the adrenals in on any kind of emergency conversation here. If the adrenals don't hear the word about emergency, they're not going to do anything. I've said for decades, the best way to fix the adrenals is don't use them. They'll fix themselves. So here, the essential oils can also do a lot. Now, here's why I couldn't just put a list down, because I can have people who love lavender, and lavender puts them to sleep and they feel good, and just everything about lavender is this nice, luxurious experience. And some people smell lavender and they go, ew, I can't stand that. It reminds me of some bad experience. You have your own personal experience with these oils. So as you smell them, as you experience them and use them, you have to find out that oil that gives you the big, there's a place of peace just by smell. Shinrin Yoku, good example for me. Clove, star anise. These are oils that just when I smell them, I have this, I want to just lay back and sit in my chair and watch the sunset. That's the feeling that they give me. Other people hate those oils. That's fine. They get theirs, I get mine. So you have to explore the oils and find out which ones give you that feeling. Now, there's also the way to shut down the messaging. Frankincense with the boswellic acid in the capsules is a very good way. Frankincense is an almost universal regulator in being able to kind of tone down what's happening in the emergency stress reactivity from the top. This is affecting pituitary, hypothalamic, pituitary, pineal. So this is a very good oil to shut the message down from the outset. The citrus bloom, citrus bliss, and any other flower remedies, ylang-ylang being one of my favorites. All flower-based remedies and citrus oils as well have an amazing capacity to tone down the stress messaging. Especially with the flowers, they have the ability to influence the DNA's production of hormones and endorphins directly without even having to hit a receptor site. It's an amazing capacity of flowers to just calm us down almost instantly upon smell. The Metapower line, now why would we go there? Because we talked about adrenals that are struggling to keep up to the amount of threat perception. Weak adrenals lead to a system that begins to cascade fail. Well, what if we prop up the adrenals by saying, let's make more energy and have the adrenals have to respond less and give them more power. The whole metapower line, start to finish, has that capacity to infuse us with enough energy that our adrenals have a partner. They have a support system that helps them out. And the E omega plus. We have to build all of our hormones, as I said before, on cholesterol. We have to build them with good fats. And so realistically speaking, we want our good fats to be a support mechanism. So the E omega plus is a very good support or supply of those. We then have the solutions for the blood sugar axis. Remember that we talked about adrenals, but blood sugar influences the adrenals. So again, the whole metapower line, the ability to increase the metabolic rate and take fat and turn it into energy production, to be able to perform lipolysis, breaking down fats and making immediate energy production from them, again, eases the burden, and it also takes the highs, brings them down, takes the lows, brings them up. You modulate toward the middle with that kind of metabolic correction. We also want to take a look at the more nutrient-based ideas here. We want to have good solid protein. Why? Because for the lack of protein, carbohydrates tend to fill the diet. So when we have a high protein diet, the carbohydrates take a second seat, and then we become more used to using proteins as energy and fuel. So in other words, this is the heavier, longer burning fuel that then we don't have to have the coffee and the donuts and the candy and whatever else in the middle of the day just to get our blood sugar back up. Fiber does a great job of capturing some of the simple sugars as we eat them, so that they'll actually just bind them within the intestine. They never get into our bloodstream. Then we don't have the up and down blood sugar all day long. The VMG, all the nutrients that are required for blood sugar management. You can't believe the long list of things that are required to make sure that your cells and your insulin response have the ability to make sure that that actually does pull sugar out of the bloodstream. So just basic fundamental phytonutrition also does a lot of good just to manage stress levels. We also, of course, need dietary control. I mean, if you want to control blood sugar, the keto diet is by far the best. As a short-term fixative diet, it can do amazing things. But then I tend to ease people back into something more like the bulletproof diet or the paleo diet or the Whole30 diet, which is more of a balanced overall meal that still de-emphasizes simple carbs, but it allows some of the more starchy carbs in. And then exercise. You cannot ever gain blood sugar control without exercise. I don't care who you are, what you do, or what you take. Exercise is telling your body, manage blood sugar. That's the basic fundamental message. You have to be able to have sugar to make that muscle cell work. And if there's several different methods to make that happen, you're going to go through all of them as you exercise. Cardiovascular exercise especially is adept at making sure you know how to tap each one of your fuel tanks till it's gone, until you finally reach the last fuel tank. If you only use the first fuel tank ever, you're not going to ever be able to be accessible and use the rest of your fuel tanks of energy supply. So you have to have exercise. You have to have at least 3 days, 30 minutes, and it has to be, considerably that you're breathing hard and your heart's pumping hard. Now, let's talk about the thyroid. The thyroid is, again, kind of one of those complex things. We saw that there's a whole set of things that are required to make this all happen correctly. Well, I turn to our relatives, Uncle Frank and Aunt Sandy and Cousin Myrrh. They are fantastic regulators of that feedback loop that we talked about. So Uncle Frank is usually a pituitary thing. Aunt Sandy, the sandalwood on the top pineal reflex point, which is also known as the crown chakra, the brow chakra here for frankincense. And then Cousin Myrrh oil put directly onto the thyroid gland here on your neck. Now, what you find when you do that is that this whole regulatory thing of evaluation and measurement of the T4 and stimulatory TSH and then production of T4 goes much better when they're regulated by those oils that seem to have this relationship with one another that cause there to be proper communication. Now, when that's all working right, you produce your raw product correctly, but now that goes to the liver, doesn't it? So this is where we want to make sure that we routinely, when I say routinely, maybe about every 3 months, we want to take some Zendocrine herbal caps and then Zendocrine gel caps. Now remember that the herbal capsules are going to process toxins from the liver from a protein-oriented basis. So protein-based toxins and the protein-based mechanisms of detoxification are going to be supported by the herbal capsules. The Zendocrine gel caps are going to be more like a soap where it emulsifies and breaks down the chemical toxins that we get that are fat-based. So between the two of those, you take two different angles to clear the liver of waste and toxins. Now that cleaner liver is going to do a better job at then doing the conjugation of those hormones. Now I will mention, if we go back to the previous slide, we're talking about the VMG plus, that's also going to end up being a source of B vitamins. Those B vitamins will also facilitate the methylation processes that the liver needs in order to do that conjugation. And then Terrazyme. I talk about this often. I use this almost every day in my practice, where somebody has a lot of mess to clean up, a lot of debris in the blood, the lymphatic system. We have to get this metabolic waste out of our body. Well, enzymes that digest protein do a great job of this, but we have to take those enzymes in on a completely empty stomach. What do I mean by that? You haven't eaten for 2 hours, you will not eat again for another hour. So in that middle of a 3-hour span of time, then you take your pills. Now, why do you do that? Now there's no food for these enzymes to digest. They'll exit the digestive system, go into the blood or lymphatic system, and then start chewing up things there. Again, this is waste. This is toxins. These can even be infections. Your own inflammatory cells that might be causing you pain can be eaten up by the enzymes when they're taken on that empty stomach. Now, this also has lipase in it, which is going to help you break up fatty-based toxins. It has protein digesting enzymes in it, proteolytics. They're going to break down protein-based waste and toxins. So this is a great tool to be able to get you to rid your body of a lot of large particles, turn them into small particles. Now you're going to drink enough water, and then you're going to exercise, and then all those little particles just come right out of you. That's a really good tactic to make sure your thyroid has a clear path through that conjugation and delivery process. Now, then there's the solution for the top part. We call this the upper dantian, the TH3 of Chinese medicine. So this is where we need to, again, regulate the messages that are being evaluated, processed, and sent. So this is, again, the adaptive oil and capsules. This enhances GABA. That means the messaging becomes much more toned down and relative to actual harm. This is a very good one to just kind of calm things down. You're still going to have the same messaging, just less of it. Uncle Frank on Sandy do, again, a great job. Again, I typically find that sandalwood on the crown chakra point, frankincense on the pituitary or brow chakra point do a great job of regulation of pituitary pineal. And then neroli, jasmine, magnolia, blue lotus, rose, clary calm or clary sage, all do wonderful jobs. And also then saying from here down, then the rest of the glands from the neck down seem to get really good effects if we use these in various locations throughout the body, where the glands are, or certain chakra locations. Those set of oils from the neroli down are very good at managing body communication from one gland to another, reaction to another, process, metabolism. This is how you kind of then say, I'm going to start with the top, get those working right, and then kind of figure out where I need to do the others. And any or all of those listed can be very useful for just about anybody with any hormonal problem. So these are very useful for just lots of different variety of things. One thing I would also note with the frankincense and sandalwood, we're having increasing problems and a almost daily occurrence of people being strongly affected by electromagnetic pollution, these signals of things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and 5G and all these other signals. The people who have the biggest problems with that seem to have the greatest need for the frankincense and sandalwood. Just realize that our messaging that we have up here is based on a certain rhythm of vibration and repetition. And that would be like this. So if you look at my hand, it's a relatively even flow of a rhythmic, repetitious pattern. Introduce 5G, it's this. our body systems are not made for that kind of hyper communication all the time. That's only supposed to occur in an emergency. That means when you're exposed to all these electromagnetic signals, you're getting a constant 24/7, 365 emergency. This is why so many people's hormonal systems are going off the rails and we can't seem to manage them because there's too much excitatory signal happening. Put the frankincense and sandalwood on, and at least it kind of modulates it down to say, wait a minute here, that's a false emergency. Don't respond to that one so much. So this is a way that you can then sort to manage that. Now, there's other strategies. I wear some stuff on me all the time. My office has a thing. My home has a thing. I'm protected from it almost all of my day. But again, for the most part, people need to be very aware that this is now becoming a problem that is not going away. It's probably only going to get stronger and worse. So we have to have strategies about it now. So that was kind of the run through on, we have this whole system of feedback loops and communication and reactionary things that all are a system that if we don't understand the system, we may not know where to intervene within that system to solve our problems. I can tell you this, go get your hormones measured by a blood test or a saliva test or whatever. This hormone is low, and just take more of that hormone. That really doesn't solve your problem, does it? Because you didn't take care of the entire feedback loop. Taking replacement hormones is a temporary way that you're going to solve one symptom, but throw another feedback loop off another thing, and then that will be off. This is playing whack-a-mole with your hormones. It does not work in the end. Only replacement hormones that should be used when somebody's missing a gland. Your thyroid gets irradiated or taken out because of cancer or something like this. Fine, yes, you have to take the replacement model. But realistically, if you've got a gland, it can produce. If you have a metabolic system, it can be made to be interactive and that negative feedback loop can be proper, but a lot of other peripheral things have to be done. Liver being the one that keeps coming up over and over again. So this is important for us to understand. Hormones are not just these singular individual things that if one is low, then here, take more. If something's high, then block it. Well, you have a whole interconnected system that then is going to go out of whack too. So realistically speaking, the functional methods of working with your hormones and the endocrine system is really taking care of these basics, and the messaging needs to be controlled. So that's kind of what I had. There's some information here. I'm the founder of Whole Life Clinic. I'm the president of the International Holistic Health Alliance. I'm the president and principal instructor of the IHHA Naturopathic Doctor Academy. I'm a very busy guy, but if you do need to get a hold of me and you have some questions of what to do with your health, I am willing to kind of answer you if I can, but realize that I'm very busy, so sometimes it takes a few days. But please, if we have any questions now, Sandy, this would be a good time to start working on those.
Absolutely. If you wouldn't mind, stop sharing, and I will finish up. And if you want to take a peek at those, we'll answer some of those as well.
Sure.
I hope everyone tonight will get on to the portal here and I'll do that next. bit.ly/email list DE. If you're looking for the recording, it will be sent to you if you join this. If you're wanting to go out there and do some search and find it, absolutely. I wouldn't check before Friday morning, Friday afternoon, somewhere in there. bit.ly/Discovery Essentials. There is an abundance of information out there. For those of you that are new, please scan the QR code and then join the Discovery Essentials, so that'll be delivered to you. For the next hour, check your progress on graduation. Many of you have graduated in the last couple of weeks, and some of you this week. bit.ly/grad progress 2025. Kayla will put those in the chat, so please take those out of the chat or scan the QR code right now. bit.ly/continuing ed 2025. So that is to get your graduation gift. If you graduate tonight, if not, please check your progress. There is an abundance of amazing education that's out there on the Permanent Library. Please reference this, and you will find a lot that you can share with your family and friends and other folks as well. So here are the graduation gifts. After you've done 10 classes, you can pick 2 of these, or the essential oil certification and the social media, the teachable courses are available to you as well. Great way, $97 a piece. So take advantage of those. 3 ways to purchase the amazing oils and supplements that Dr. Essen said, retail, wholesale, and below. We want everyone to go down here, and here is how. Talk to them about what they're needing. Look to find a kit that best suits them, or this is going to be below wholesale. Or if you're looking to place an order in August, look at what is here and then place this to get this below your wholesale price as well. So here are some others. And he talked about some of these as well. I know he brought up a couple times the Omega. He brought up the Terrazyme. So here is the foundational bundle as well as some of the oils. So the Aroma Touch, again, some of these, as he talked about the emotional things, keep in mind, he's talked about Citrus Bloom. He talked about Adaptive. Great items here, again, below wholesale. So this is a great way, any of these, to get started. And this is the cheapest way to get them into your home. So reach out to whoever invited you tonight. And we want to thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy doTERRA's wonderful oils, a true gift of the earth. My contact information is there. Kayla will put those in the chat as well as my email. So if you got questions, reach out. I am booking, and now I've got, I think, 2 openings for November, and I'm going to be looking at January real soon. And so we will, yes, approval from Dr. Essen, will have him back in 2026. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I really, before we do the drawing, Dr. Essen, I can't begin to thank you. I know you see a lot of this, a lot of it that's in here. Folks are just amazed, and I see the word fantastic and outstanding and all these things to you. So thank you so much for presenting tonight. And if you can pick a number from 4 to 116, we will have our drawing, and that will be the big fiber.
Sure. 78.
Okay, Kayla will look that up, and so watch in the chat. And questions, I'm sure you've probably seen some of these.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat now. I think the first question is this, when I was talking about the liver and the storage of excess sugar in the liver, the question then becomes, is this why we're seeing so many fatty livers, more so than ever before? Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. It is a combination of not only too much sugar, but failing adrenals that ends up having that happen. And then the liver then is the victim of that circumstance. So get rid of the sugar is one thing, but then again, you have to fix your adrenals to be able to knock on the door with glucagon to pull that excess sugar out of there. Worst case scenario, you can also use a lot of lipase enzyme to start dissolving that, and phosphatidylcholine to liquefy it. I will say that the MetaPower blend or the MetaPower capsules can also liquefy that fat and make it easier to move out of there. And then a question kind of back in the idea of similar idea of blood sugar is, so if we do fasting, can that also help to move the system back into a balanced state, keep the highs from being high, keep the lows from being low? Yes, it can. Although I would suggest that you don't just dive into it and the first day start fasting. Also, with the idea that the idea of fasting here is fasting from sugar and fasting from protein. If you eat carbohydrates, you break your fast. If you eat proteins, you break your fast. If you eat fat, you didn't break your fast. So what does that mean? So you're starting off and you're going to eat your meal at 6 o'clock in the evening, and you go all the way through the next morning, and your intention is to get all the way to lunch before you eat again. But oh man, you're just dying. Your hunger is just killing you. You have to have something to eat. If you eat something that's 90, 95% fat, you can eat that and it doesn't count as breaking your fast. Because fat, you want to be able to perform the breakdown and get ketones into the system that will supply you with energy for your systems, but it doesn't move your insulin an inch. So now you're not, the effect of fasting is not to lose weight. The effect of fasting is to not have your blood sugar dysregulated. So you can have as much fat as you want until you begin to train your body to then not need anything in the morning until your afternoon meal. There's a lot of really good books out there. There's a lot of advancing science concerning fasting. I think it's a great thing. I do it myself. Okay. There's a person who says, I have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but not assigned any medication because my blood is constantly in the normal range. Now, I assume that we're talking about A1C as the normal range. What most physicians don't even understand is, what are you measuring when you measure A1C? A1C is a measurement of your advanced glycated end products. Now, the easiest example I can give to you to understand this, and advanced glycated end products is just like creme brulee. You have this nice, soft, gooey custard as the base. Think of that as your cells, or even your red blood cells. Then you sprinkle sugar on the top. That's the blood sugar that you have that's elevated. And then you torch that sugar with a flame to oxidize it. And now that oxidation makes the sugar into a hard, crusty thing, forming a hard, crusted, inflexible, damage-prone thing to the custard underneath. Now, if you think about your blood cells that way, or your cardiovascular cells that way, there's two parts to that thing. There is elevated sugar, but there's also elevated oxidation. Those two things in whatever combination above a certain mark will give you a high A1C. So you have glucose problems, but you don't have high A1C. Guess what? That means your glucose is out of control, but you don't have high oxidation. Why might you not have high oxidation? Say a lot of antioxidants, a lot of things that are in your system that have cleared out the toxins and removed the free radicals. And now you're not oxidizing that sugar. The sugar may still be there, and yes, that is still a problem, but it doesn't oxidize, therefore it's not diabetes by the measurement of A1C. This is, again, most medical doctors don't even understand what they're measuring when they look at the A1C. They just know that it's a marker. What if indeed you could clean yourself up enough that even with high blood sugar, you could have normal A1C? Now, I've had people who have normalized blood sugar. Their blood sugar is even to the point of low, but because they have high oxidative stress in their body, their A1C is still high. So again, it's a two-part measurement. Which exact percentage of which do you have? That's you, the individual. But keep yourself clean, get rid of the free radicals. That's going to help no matter what. Now, let's see. I can't seem to move down to the new ones, Sandy. There they are. Friend of mine said her thyroid removed ago. Any suggestions for a natural solution? She has to take replacement therapy. There's no other way around this. You cannot generate thyroid hormone from no gland. But what you can do is clean up that liver. I suggested the 2 Zendocrine products. Clean up the liver and make the adrenals supported. The things, again, all those things that were in the list. Now that drug, that replacement model, will work to best efficiency possible. I see a lot of people on replacement. The problem here is that they also have gummy systems that make that drug work inefficiently, and they still have a lot of hypothyroid symptoms, despite the drug having adequate levels of T4 being measured by the hypothalamus. But their cells aren't receiving the T3 because their liver's all gummed up or something like this. Geranium, clary sage, absolutely. I mean, I hate geranium in terms of the smell of it, but I understand that it's a very powerful, wonderful oil. It just, that smell just makes me cringe. But the clary sage I've used frequently over the years with people, especially putting it directly onto the adrenals. I've seen it do wonderful things. How do we know if we're talking too much T4 as prescribed to the doctors? I just kind of hinted at that. How do you know if you're taking too much? As you would measure your blood levels of both free and total T4. Then you'd want to also measure your total T3, total and free T3 uptake. I get a little incensed at medical doctors who are not allowed by the insurance companies to measure adequately to understand the whole thyroid process. There should be 8 numbers tested every single time you're investigating the thyroid. Most of the time, it's simply TSH plus maybe either T4 or T3. This is inadequate testing. You cannot develop a pattern from 2 numbers. So again, if you really want it, you need all 8 numbers. So how do you know you get too much T4? Simply that, you get it measured somewhere. How about the Zendocrine oil? Same as the herbal. So the Zendocrine oil in the bottle of drops is going to be the same as is in the capsule of the gel cap. Then there's also a separate, different one called the herbal Zendocrine capsules. So the difference is herbals are capsules oils are gel caps, if that helps you out. Could you please repeat the Zendekin recommendation? How often, how long of a cycle? Basically, I would take a bottle of each during a month-long period of time. So in other words, if there's 60 pills in a bottle, you would take 2 pills per day for 30 days, and then do that about every 3 months. Again, in our world where we have so many toxins, you cannot detoxify and clean up your liver enough. It's just persistent. It's everywhere. It's in almost every person who walks in my door. Where again does a frankincense or sandalwood go? Frankincense would be more so on the pituitary reflex, right between the eyebrows, or otherwise known as the brow chakra. And then there's on the top of the head, on the crown. That would be if you went straight down, you go to your spine. That's the crown chakra on there. But the sandalwood goes there. Terrazyme should be taken on an empty stomach. Yes. And again, 2 hours after eating, 1 hour before eating again. So in that sort of gap of time when there's nothing in the stomach. When should we be taking the supplements and applying the oils? That's going to depend. It gets really complex, and there are circadian cycles of each organ in the body has a 2-hour window of time when it's at its peak, performance and what it's supposed to be doing. The issue there is that you need to have that body clock and then determine, well, which part of your body needs the oil and then apply it at that time. What part of your body needs that supplement and take it during that 2-hour span of time. Well, let's see, is it drop frankincense? Yeah, I mean, drops kind of relative. Like I use a roller applicator for my frankincense, so drop is sort of a term that doesn't apply. A little mudge, a little, swish, whatever you want to call it. I tend to not be terribly precise with my oils. I have a bottle of oils that I put on my rib cage every day so I can clear my lungs from biking. I just dump them in my palm. I'm probably 30 to 40 drops. I have no idea. I mean, it just doesn't matter to me. It feels good to do it. So I wouldn't be so terribly sensitive about it. So I know some people, they put them on their skin and they turn into a lobster in that spot. That's, then you have to find that out. But for me, I'll just, I'll put a whole bunch on me. It never bothers me a bit. Watch the recording for order replacement. What about kids? Can they also use the same oils? When you say kids, when we're talking about these things, children are up to the age of 12. At the age of 12, they then develop a fully functioning liver. Remember that the liver is the majority of the action that happens in the processing and delivery and all the stuff that happens in the hormonal system. The liver is that borderline. So before 12, especially with a Zendekin, you'd be really cautious with that. After 12, you could have, say, like a half adult dose and probably be just fine. Again, now, where it comes to the hormone production centers, the reproductive organs, either testicles or ovaries, and even to the point, the adrenals and the pancreas are not going to be fully formed and fully active quite until you're probably more like in the 16, 17-year-old range. So when again, what do you mean by kids? Again, I would say 12 or older, treat them like a half-size adult. Up to 17, then they're a full adult. Kind of a question I didn't quite get exactly. It says, what about using phytoestrogen? That means putting extra estrogen into the body. I can't say I'm a fan. Why? Because the plastic chemicals that we have in our environment mimic estrogen. That means your body can't tell the difference between the plastic and your own naturally produced estrogen, meaning that most people have overabundant amounts of estrogen to begin with. And then I spend a lot of my time detoxing out all that plastic in order to get their estrogen levels down to normal. So unless you have a severe estrogen deficiency from something like a hysterectomy where the ovaries were removed, that's a product that I just don't find much use for. Again, a rare occasion, yes, here or there. But generally speaking, we are swimming in a sea of estrogen. We don't need more. I don't like the smell of lavender. Well, I'm right there with you, sister. I mean, it's just meh. Okay. I love my adaptive. That I love. Let's see. Are we going to see the handout with the oils? Please listen to the recording. If you have Hashimoto's, can you drop the T4 pills? Well, you would want to work with a professional about this because realistically, we need to measure the capacity of the gland to be able to produce if you get off of it. The longer you've been on a thyroid replacement therapy, the less chance there is of being able to drop the pills, honestly. And if you've been taking a thyroid replacement like Synthroid or something more than 10 years, I'm going to tell you, no, you're not going to get off of that. Not for any extended period of time because the gland is atrophied. If you don't use a muscle, it gets weak. If you don't use a gland, it starts to shrivel away. Now, I know that there are stories of people who've done it, but it's uncomfortable. I had a woman demand that we do it. She spent 3 months laying on the couch, barely able to move. And then she got her thyroid function back. If that's kind of process you want to go through, sure, you could try it, but I'm not going to recommend it, especially if there's any kind of tissue damage that's occurring to the thyroid. You got to really consider that the thyroid replacement pill is keeping you from harming yourself with autoimmunity. So again, it's a little bit of an individual question. It's hard to know, for sure. And what about a diet for vegans? Stop being a vegan would be my answer to that. Honestly, there are no complete plant proteins except fermented soy, and you shouldn't be eating soy. The only complete proteins exist in supplements or meat proteins. Now, what that means is that if you are going to be a vegan, and there has been no vegan culture anywhere in the world all the way up to about 30 years ago, there's simply no basis of science for a vegan diet because no human beings did that for any extended period of time. And vegans are some of the sickest people that I see, and there's higher rates of certain diseases with vegans. Again, there's a lot of hazard to that. Now, I do know that there are vegans who are very careful supplementers, and they can do lots of research, and they can get just exactly the right combination of things to meet their needs. Or you could just eat a steak. If you're going to spend half your time and efforts on eating the perfect diet, fine. If you've got that time and efforts to make, you go right ahead. But the reality is we are omnivores, and the complete proteins that exist in nature for us are meat-based. That doesn't mean we eat only meat. I do not like the carnivore diet either, but a balanced diet has always proved to be the better version. Small amounts of high quality meat, lots of vegetables, low carbohydrates, but lots of fiber. This is how we should eat. Tons of fat should be in our diet. In fact, we should probably be eating a minimum 50% of our diet should be fats. And you're not going to also get that from a lot of plants. So again, I'm not a fan of veganism. You might be able to tell. It's not that you can't do it, but there's going to be a problem because, again, most of what you use as amino acid basis to make hormones and neurotransmitters, guess where they come from? Meat proteins only. That combination doesn't exist in plants. So again, this is a challenge. My son's pituitary gland cut at the age of 4 after brain tumor surgery, completely understood hypothalamus, yeah, so the axis. So in other words, there's been damage to the pituitary gland in this case. Is it not functioning because it was physically injured? There's actually ways using stem cell stimulators to repair that. My nephew had a son who had a pituitary adenoma, and then that was also surgically removed. His pituitary wasn't working very well. We gave him some things to repair that, and suddenly he's back to normal. All right, so then what do you recommend for protecting against the magnetic stuff? The magnetic stuff is an interesting phrase to use. I use this little necklace thing. I don't know if you can see it. It's called the HEAL capsule, HEAL, from a company called Leela Quantum Tech. Leela, LEEAH, and Quantum Tech, or LeelaQ.com, if I remember right. And they have a whole variety of things. Clothing, things shaped like a credit card. I've got this thing that I have in my office called the Quantum Block. This provides a half-mile radius of electromagnetic protection for me and my lovely homeopathic remedies that are up here. There's really good stuff on there. They have also very good videos and educational material. Again, I think from a day-to-day basis, also throw on the frankincense and sandalwood. But these are a more stable, regulated, they discharge the electricity down to a null polarity, and then it doesn't harm you.
Dr. Essen, I'm going to have you take one more. You can keep going here on and on. So you've been very generous to be on for an hour and a half already.
So one more question then. The next one was, how beneficial is it to diffuse these oils? So let's just say frankincense, sandalwood, the others that I mentioned, like neroli, jasmine, whatever. Certainly our olfactory bulb that's up here can grab a hold of those smells and have instantaneous responses within the brain that will have a very similar effect from the topical application on these reflex points. It's different in the sense, though, that you're working with smell and some vibration, where when you put it on the reflex points that are specific, now you're working with smell and strong vibration. So that I would say that the diffuse might even be better for kids, where they have a less dramatic hormonal system. So that might be a more gentle nudge in the right direction, where an adult that has some hormonal problems already, I'd say the topical application is going to be better.
One last one, and it's kind of throughout. Tell folks again about Terrazyme, and then that's where we'll wrap up.
Sure. It's called proteolytic enzyme therapy. Again, what this is if you put enzymes into the system of digestion and there's no food there, it's been 2 hours since you've eaten, the food has moved on from the stomach well down into the small intestine. The enzymes arrive in that environment and there's no food to digest. They will migrate through the walls of the intestine into the lymphatic system and into the blood. While there, they're going to target things that don't belong. So protein digesting enzymes like protease are going to go find proteins that have a foreign look to them compared to natural body parts. And the enzyme's job will then be to break apart that thing which doesn't belong. The lipase that's in there will go find fatty structures that don't belong and break them up. So there's all these different enzymes in Terrazyme that if you take it on that empty stomach, not with food, they're going to find something to break down. Then they take the bigger chunks, turn them into tiny chunks. Now, when you drink lots of water, when you exercise or sweat in a sauna or something like this, then those will more easily flush from the system. It'll be easier on your liver, easier on your kidneys, easier on your lymphatic system to dispose of those smaller particles.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Essen. And everyone, please share your appreciation, unmute, and share that with